We need to have an honest conversation about New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW and the tweets that the Great Khan had put out yesterday, and it has become wildfire on Twitter and all over the internet. And the only reason why I say let's have an honest conversation about it, because while Google Translate may not be the most accurate to translate something, and it's always great to get a native Japanese speaker that can translate Japanese to English. But right now we're working with Google Translate because as much as I say that I would love to learn the Japanese language, and I have italki, which basically you can hire a tutor for $5 or less or $5 or more, and you can learn the Japanese language or any other language. I still have not embarked on that journey, but I would love to learn Japanese just so that way I can be part of and participate and understand the culture a little bit more. So eventually I will start taking italki classes. It's just I'm a little nervous. It's that first step to be talking to somebody on a Zoom call or something and learning Japanese like that. Anyway, I am going to be breaking down the Great Khan's tweets the way that Google Translate has translated them. If you guys want to see the screenshots, because this podcast episode will not be in video format, you can head over to marieshadows.substack.com and see the screenshots in Japanese and see the screenshots in English. It will be as a newsletter. So the link will be down in the description below, so go sign up. But first and foremost, welcome to a brand new episode of the Square Circle Podcast. I am your host, Marie Shadows, and on this episode of the Square Circle Podcast, we will be going over the Great Khan tweets. I would like to preface this by saying that I have no ill will against the Great Khan. I think that the Great Khan has a lot of potential and could definitely be holding the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship title one day and even go after other championship titles and not try to go after the King of Pro Wrestling championship title, because that title is like, why is that here? I do not think that we need the King of Pro Wrestling championship title. So this podcast episode is to address what the Great Khan says. Nothing else, no underneath the surface level. It's just surface level. We are discussing what he says in his tweets. Again, they are Google translated, so if anything is lost in translation or in context, it's from Google Translate. And again, I will be putting all the screenshots, the Japanese one and the Google Translate one, up on my newsletter, which you should be subscribed to. Head over to marieshadows.substack.com. I also want to give a big shout out to everyone that has viewed, subscribed, and commented on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Square Circle Podcast. Thank you so much for interacting with the YouTube channel and helping me out in that way, and even adding your own comments to what I say in these videos and these podcast episodes. And again, you do not have to agree with me. That's totally okay. You can have your opinion. I can have my opinion. We can probably agree to disagree, or you can learn a new perspective on professional wrestling that isn't just saying that this sucks, that sucks, and we're not going to do anything about it. I want the best for New Japan Pro Wrestling. I even want the best for AEW, whether or not you believe me. But I do think that having options in professional wrestling helps, because a lot of people are coming into the professional wrestling space. So the more places they have, the more reps they could get in, because I could tell you for a fact that on the indies, even though they say it's who you know, most of the time, the boys club stays the boys club. And they work the same companies, the same circuit, and they don't get out of that. So for more places like AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, MOW, WWE, and anywhere else that is popping up, it's good for everyone involved. It's good for the ecosystem. And that is good all around. This podcast episode will follow the same format as the previous one when I talked about Tanahashi's 10-step plan for the growth of New Japan Pro Wrestling. I'll read a little bit and give my opinion on what I just read. So here we go. Again, this is from the Great Khan himself on Twitter. He starts it off by saying, I expressed my personal opinion on strengthening the relationship with AEW. Honestly, I think the problem with this relationship is that New Japan Pro Wrestling doesn't have the financial strength. Let me stop right there. It's not always about money. We can agree to disagree that the yen is down, but then again, throughout all of economics, money goes down, money rises, and sometimes money stays in the middle. We are all suffering. We can acknowledge this fact that we are all suffering in one way, shape, or form. However, that should not be used as a crutch as to why New Japan Pro Wrestling stars who are foreign decide to leave the company. It's not that. That is not the main issue. Because if professional wrestlers are smart, and I hope that professional wrestlers listen to this podcast. If not, if you're friends with a professional wrestler, share this out to them because they have to listen to this. There are way more ways to create extra income to sort of make your life comfortable. You shouldn't rely on a company to give you the check after check after check, because professional wrestling is unlike any other kind of job. Professional wrestling is not a 9-to-5 job. Professional wrestling is very unstable. I would definitely say it. Sometimes you get booked. Sometimes you don't get booked. Sometimes bookings fall through. Sometimes you have to cancel because life fucking happens. However, to always use this financial crisis as a crutch for New Japan Pro Wrestling, it's not that. That has to stop being the narrative. And you want to know why? It's because I will have commenters that have a profile picture that is anime, wrestling related. It is never their own profile picture. I will have those kind of commenters in my comments talking about Forbidden Door. They'll be like, Forbidden Door makes a lot of money. They make a fuck ton of money. Let me look at the 2023 Forbidden Door pay-per-view event, and let's talk about the money. It says on Google, because you guys love to say to Google it, it generated approximately $7.4 million in gross revenue from pay-per-view, ticket sales, and merchandise. After accounting for pay-per-view carrier cuts, because the networks and where you put it on and the pay-per-views, they have to get their cut. The net revenue for AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling was estimated to be around $4.9 million, right? The event also set a new live gate record for AEW with a total of 14,000 fans in attendance and a gate of 1.2 million. So let's really look at this, right? Because that's not a lot of money, especially when you have to split it between the providers, when you have to factor in production costs, travel costs, renting the arena, and somebody has to get money back into their pocket, right? And also pay the wrestlers and pay everybody. That money is not a fuck ton of money. You guys make it seem as if like they make a lot of money like WrestleMania. WrestleMania is the only event in wrestling history that right now they are doing so well that they have extra money for days and they can spread that out. Everyone is happy. Everyone gets paid. Everyone gets bonuses. You don't hear New Japan Pro Wrestling wrestlers get bonuses. They barely get bonuses anymore. You don't hear AEW wrestlers get bonuses. So I don't understand where this narrative of Forbidden Door makes a fuck ton of money, because this money does not last. This is how you know that AEW fans and maybe some New Japan fans, especially the ones that have an anime profile picture or a wrestler picture and no picture of themselves, don't understand business and don't understand how things are divided and where they go. Because they're in the constant machine of, I got to work for the man in order to survive, rather than sitting down and maybe taking some business classes and thinking about business, or even asking promoters, or even coming to the Twitter spaces that Gabe Sapolsky holds with actual promoters. And sometimes we will talk in those spaces about what gets paid, this gets paid, we gotta make sure the boys get paid. And if the boys bring their own merchandise, that's their own money, because we can't really give them extra. We can only give them what their fee is. So if they make anything extra at the merchandise table, that is theirs. Like, you guys have to go to these talks, these wrestle talks, okay? Not the creators of Wrestle Talk, but you got to go to these wrestling talks in these spaces to understand how money is divided in the wrestling world. And it's the same thing in corporate world. It's the same thing in a retail store. There are so many reasons why money goes here, money goes there. You're supposed to invest in yourself and all this kind of stuff. But to get back to the main point is that the Forbidden Door does not make a fuck ton of money. WrestleMania makes a fuck ton of money. All those Saudi shows make a fuck ton of money. So there's a difference here. Like, I don't like math for the hell of it, but I can tell you what's a fuck ton of money and not a fuck ton of money, okay? Forbidden Door does not make a fuck ton of money at all. By the time that NJPW gets their share, it may not be enough. It may not be worth it. So stop with the comments and the narrative of Forbidden Door makes a fuck ton of money. This is why the partnership is good. No, it is not. They're using it as a crutch. And this is what happens in American society, is that this is how they push out propaganda. And I don't want to make this into a political thing, but sometimes it crosses over because people are brainwashed to believe that when someone says something enough and enough and enough, that person tends to act like they are an expert in the topic of wrestling and merchandising and money and success and fuck ton of money. They become this expert, which they are not. And they want to tell you that Forbidden Door makes a fuck ton of money. No, it does not. It makes a good amount of money where you can get a really decent cut from it, maybe even a good cut, but that's just for that day. That doesn't last. Sometimes the commenters make it seem as if it lasts until the next Forbidden Door. The Great Khan goes on to say, I don't know if the Aussie Open went to AEW because New Japan Pro Wrestling didn't or couldn't sign a contract with them, but they would have done it if they had the financial strength. Because before he went to AEW, he was good enough to become IWGP Tag Team Champions. So it would be strange not to sign a contract. Let's talk about Aussie Open for a second, because I still feel some type of way of them just jumping ship because they wanted the money and not realize the situation, not take a step back to be like, hey, how we're going to tackle this? What else can we do? Can we talk to the members of the United Empire? Because I know for a fact that no one saw it coming in the group. No one did. And to save face, the Great Khan did go on an interview and say that, oh, Aussie Open went to AEW to expand the United Empire as planned. No, they went over to AEW to be AEW signed wrestlers, which basically should forfeit them being out of the United Empire and having to start a new life with the Don Callis family, because wrestling, and only doing that for the money rather than trying to figure out what they needed to do, take a breath, and talk with people before something happens. Even Ospreay at one point had said that he did everything in his power to have New Japan Pro Wrestling sign Aussie Open, and that was the end of that. Well, what kind of conversations did you have with New Japan Pro Wrestling? Who did you talk to? How did you present Aussie Open to New Japan Pro Wrestling management in a way where they can agree with you and invest in them? I do agree that they became the IWGP Tag Team Champions, and that was amazing. And we thought that that was going to be the increase for them to not only sign, but at the time, no one knew that they really weren't on a contract. They were probably on an appearance contract, so they get paid per appearance. And because they were on the tour, it makes sense. However, I really thought that they were going to be part of New Japan Pro Wrestling, but that is not the case. I just think that because Aussie Open jumped, they were pretty scared about their future. because New Japan Pro Wrestling did not want to give them a contract, but they had them on the tours, and that really means something. We see this all the time in New Japan Pro Wrestling. We see certain wrestlers that show up for a tour, and depending on the reaction that they get, if they're able to keep them, they'll bring them on to the next tour, and then eventually they integrate them into the roster. However, in this situation, I just think nerves got the best of them and they decided to leave. But I would consider Aussie Open to be AEW now and not really part of the United Empire. You don't really jump like that and leave a broken foundation for United Empire. And that also goes for Ospreay, because United Empire has this broken foundation, and I love United Empire, and United Empire can rival the other units in New Japan Pro Wrestling, but they have to rebuild, and it's not really happening how it should be happening. The Great O'Khan goes on to say, other players who moved to AEW may have had various reasons, but their contracts were definitely high, and it is no mistake that the high contract money was the reason, and this flow of transfers is sure to grow. That is sort of like yes and no. Yeah, you could go for more money, but again, I will remind everybody that this is what happened to WCW. WCW gave a lot of the stars that came in a high money contract to the point where it was guaranteed and it was not sustainable anymore. Money does not grow on trees. Tony Khan is going to eventually run out of money. Tony Khan's inherited money from his dad is going to eventually run out. The extra money from Ric Flair's Woo energy drink company is going to run out. The money is going to run out if Tony Khan does not do anything to get more people, to have more fans stay, and to sell tickets and to sell merchandise and to all this kind of shit. It's not going to work out well for all the AEW wrestlers that have these high money contracts, because money is going to run out. Now, they will all have to jump to WWE because WWE seems to have the overflowing amount of money at this very, very moment. The Great O'Khan goes on to say, first of all, in Japan, how many players who went from New Japan to other organizations became Bushiroad's system? There are countless other groups such as New Japan. In the past, every organization could make a living by wrestling, and there wasn't that much of a difference in sales, so each group moved on. The reason why there hasn't been one recently is obviously because New Japan Pro Wrestling is selling well in Japan. It is. I believe that it is selling well, but it may also be selling decently. And it is holding up after the pandemic and after people are leaving. It is holding up. The Japanese fan base will always be loyal to New Japan Pro Wrestling. That is a given. It is not like here in America where people flip-flop and people curse you out for liking one company versus the other, or you like all the companies for various reasons. And one of the reasons, it's not just you liking the wrestler, you like what the company puts out. But over in Japan, they know what loyalty is. They know what loyalty is about. And that's what they like about a person. And that's what they will respect about a person, that's loyalty. So there's a reason why nothing truly bad has happened to New Japan Pro Wrestling. So us over here in America, we make it seem as it's way more worse than it is. And it's really not. New Japan Pro Wrestling is decent because of the fan base. And the wrestlers who went from New Japan to other companies, they do it because of opportunity. And it might be a little better in pay, but not necessarily. But they do it for better opportunities. The Great O'Khan goes on to say, a big reason why I didn't go overseas from New Japan Pro Wrestling was the risk of leaving New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is similar to Japan's lifetime employment system if I went to an unstable organization where I could be released and was fired. I think this was because there was a fear that the wrestlers who did this would never be able to return to New Japan Pro Wrestling again. Okay, a couple of things. This is where it starts to get a little tone deaf. And I don't really use that phrase a lot because even online, I quote tweeted someone big because later on in this same thing, we talk about how like AEW like saves this sort of idea, which, I'll just read it. The Great Khan continues to say, however, being connected to AEW makes it easy to go and return. This is an event called Last Match, it's in quotes, that represents this. Now, over online, let's not spread misinformation. Let's not spread any kind of delusion when it comes to thinking that or assuming that the Great Khan is thanking AEW for this, because if AEW was never invented, never around, there will always be places where you can go back to again and wrestle. I basically said on Twitter and quote tweeted this person that as long as you do not burn bridges in professional wrestling, you will be able to return back to the company that you once fought at. It's a matter of being respectful, keeping that network line open. And yeah, I understand that people are always going to have a falling out. People are always going to say some dumb shit and then they don't want you to wrestle back at the company. But if you leave on good terms, if you explain yourself and you don't burn that bridge, you will be able to go back to New Japan Pro Wrestling or any other company for that matter. And AEW is not the inventor or the savior when it comes to getting a return booking for New Japan Pro Wrestling or for any other company. They are not the savior. They just contribute to the ecosystem that allows their wrestlers to move around the chessboard, because Tony Khan wants to sign everybody and everyone that has already been pre-built. Because if you are just starting out and you're trying to get your reps in, do not try to make AEW a goal to go to. That's for wrestlers to keep in mind. Once you are pre-built, then you could try making it to AEW. But AEW and Tony Khan want pre-built wrestlers. So if you are not a pre-built wrestler, you won't make it there. And if you are a pre-built wrestler, he will try to sign you, especially if you have WWE attached to your name. And then the roster becomes bloated, and it looks like Tony Khan is doing wrestlers who are dormant, who are AEW wrestlers that are dormant, looks like doing them a favor by sending them out to different promotions. So do not be delusional and automatically thank AEW for trying to be this middleman when every other promotion in this history of professional wrestling have been the middleman to send their guys to different companies. And guess what? It was called the territory days. Wrestlers were able to move around IWA Mid-South, NWA, WCCW, all of those old school territories that we don't have today because Vince McMahon bought them all up. But that's neither here nor there. They were able to move around just very similarly how AEW and Tony Khan is able to move people around. So if the Great Khan wanted to take the risk by going to AEW for a bit, New Japan Pro Wrestling would welcome him into the roster again, no matter what. Even if AEW is like, oh, hey, we don't need you anymore, so we're letting your contract run out, because they don't terminate contracts. They let them run out, which is even more upsetting. And the Great Khan could definitely go back. He didn't burn any bridges. Wrestling is always going to be unstable because, again, this is the only sport in the world that is run on a different set of rules. Whether you believe the rules or you don't believe the rules, it is always going to be unstable. However, the connections you make along the way, the networks you make along the way, how you carry yourself, how you present yourself. Do you look like $1 million? Do you talk like $1 million? Are you a little bit giving when you're in social situations with other wrestlers, other promoters, and like other fans? Are you all of these things? And if you are, you have nothing to worry about. Just because Japan has a lifetime employment system doesn't mean that you can't go back if you never burned a bridge. This is where the Great Khan doesn't understand that part, because there's a difference in thinking of the Japanese culture and the American culture. And I'm here to tell you that between the two cultures, the things that we find in a common ground is respect, loyalty, and not burning bridges, because it works over here in America. If you are loyal, to a fault, sometimes you get a good end of the deal. Now, somebody in the comments might be like, no, that's wrong. Save it. The good of this conversation outweighs the negative. Apologies if you had negative dealings with being a loyal worker, customer, whatever it is. I understand that things fucking happen. Life fucking happens. But the good outweighs the bad in this situation and what I'm trying to present. Here in America, we do value loyalty depending on who it is, what's happening in the situation. Over here in America, you can still find people and places that like to have respect given both ways in a mutual situation, in a mutual environment. And for number 3, we appreciate do not burn the bridge. Don't burn the bridge. So AEW is not the savior. The Great Khan goes on to say, as a player, moving to a player with better money is the right choice and is completely natural. It is completely natural, but sometimes wrestlers don't think of everything as money. The Great Khan thinks of everything as money because if you follow his Instagram account, this guy is going on dates with all these girls. If you follow his Instagram account, he's paying for food and gifts and being very giving and having massages and living a very lavish life. So of course, he would consider that more money is the right choice and would say that it's completely natural. Yes, in this world, we need money to survive because we made money a thing. We put a value to money, which is the worst thing that we could do if you really, really think about it, the worst thing we could do. But we're here now, right? Sometimes money is not everything. And then sometimes people enjoy living comfortably with the money that they have. So for that line, not everyone is like the Great Khan, okay? Not everyone is. The Great Khan goes on to say, however, those who are prepared to sacrifice their lives, the management team and New Japan Pro Wrestling fans will be at a disadvantage. What? Is he acknowledging burning bridges? I think so. He goes on to say, I can assure you that if you create this trend, in parentheses, AEW offers better contract fees and sends you off with a smile even when you move, end parentheses, then your movement will accelerate. No, it does not. If you sign with AEW, you're going to be forgotten. If you're not an Ospreay, which Tony Khan is over the moon with, if you're not an Okada, if you're not one of the shiny toys that he likes, you're not going to go nowhere. And this is evident because when was the last time the Great Khan was on AEW television, despite not wanting to sign a contract with AEW to be AEW exclusive? When was the last time the Great Khan was invited back to be on an AEW Dynamite show? Not even Rampage, not Collision. They don't count in this conversation. When was the last time the Great Khan was called back to be on an AEW Dynamite show? Because AEW Dynamite is the flagship show, and that is the one that should be concerned with when it comes to getting new TV deals and getting new sponsors and getting more money coming in. Rampage is on at 11 right after SmackDown on a Friday, which is the worst time to put it on. And on Saturday, you have Collision, and that's for everyone that is buried. And then you have Ring of Honor, which is behind a paywall. No one really pays for that. So we can't really talk about this stuff. And I really can't agree that if you sign with AEW, your movement will accelerate. No, it won't. There's lots of people that you can ask for actual facts about how their time was spent in AEW, and most of the time it'll be very sucky. The Great Khan goes on to say, so what should we do? First of all, financial strength. Stop using that as a crutch. He continues, there are many ways. One way to do this will be to raise ticket prices. On the other hand, it is also possible to make it cheaper and easier to come. First of all, those two ideas are not going to help with getting more money and making the financial strength for New Japan Pro Wrestling. If you give the ticket prices an increase, nobody is going to go unless it's those really high position corporate Japanese people that want to go. But the Great Khan forgets that women and children go. And in Japanese culture, the men do give all of their money to the women of the household. So that way the women can pay the rent, pay utilities, get food, cook food, take care of the kid, and distribute the finances so that way they can stay afloat. And from my understanding, in Japanese culture, they get paid once a month. They do not get paid like how we get paid in America, whether that is weekly or bi-weekly. So if New Japan Pro Wrestling raises the prices of the tickets, that's not going to end very well. Women and children are a big factor of going to these events, especially in the cities and sometimes in the suburbs. In the suburbs, meaning like in the Sendai area and any of those regions around Sendai, those would be the perfect places to have the ticket prices raised a little bit. However, even if you do raise the ticket prices, that is not going to trickle down into anything and nothing else is going to increase. So this is why the Great Khan doesn't understand money and economics and all this kind of stuff. He's trying. I'll give him an A for effort, but to really think about it, that's not how to go about it. And then even to make the tickets cheaper would not be effective anyway. It's a lose-lose situation for both ideas. If you make the tickets cheaper, yeah, you can get an increase in Japanese fans, but you have to also think about the time of day. You also think about the day as well and who's going to really come into the venue. And depending on where you're at, you have to take a lot of things into consideration and not just say, oh yeah, maybe one way is to raise ticket prices. Or on the other hand, to cheapen the tickets for more people to come. The Great Khan goes on to say, you can promote your own ideas, but regional revitalization is cost effective. If you already have a limited number of venues, you can increase sales without incurring costs by filing the venue to capacity. In addition, AEW players do not come to local events and overseas groups are not allowed to compete, so the only competition is domestic groups. Oh, so are we actually acknowledging that AEW doesn't really send over their wrestlers, but if you are not part of AEW and if you are a wrestler and you want to go overseas to wrestle in Japan, you can? There's something not adding up with that last little thing that the Great Khan said. And I think that if AEW wrestlers are going to go over to New Japan Pro Wrestling, they leave early to avoid travel mistakes. And they go over there for story, they go over there for loyalty, they go over there for respect, because you are representing this partnership, so you should go over there. Tony Khan should allow the AEW wrestlers to go over to New Japan Pro Wrestling, and New Japan Pro Wrestling will automatically send their wrestlers over here to America and wrestle in AEW. I guarantee you that New Japan Pro Wrestling doesn't say no. It's just AEW and Tony Khan that does. Or Tony Khan would think, oh, well, let's wait until the last minute to send them over, so that way we could have a crappy Dominion semi-main event of Evil versus Jon Moxley. But let's go back up to what the Great Khan says, that you could promote your own ideas, which basically all wrestlers in New Japan Pro Wrestling is promoting their own ideas and stories. And most of the time it is organic. Sometimes they have to really work at it. And everything is all real and raw and there's no really direction. You have to know what you're doing when you get to New Japan Pro Wrestling. Unless you are a young lion and you go through the young lion system, that's totally different. But you as a seasoned wrestler, you should know what you're doing, and that is why you're able to promote your own ideas in New Japan Pro Wrestling. And if there is a limited number of venues, you can increase sales without incurring costs by filling the venue to capacity. Sometimes the venues get filled to capacity, sometimes it doesn't. It's just a matter of day, time, who's interested, who wants to go be stress-free to watch wrestling and stuff. It's a whole big thing, and the Great Khan makes it seem like it's just that simple, and it's not. The Great Khan goes on to say, so how can we make it super crowded? There are some countermeasures for this as well, but I think a title match, a card that can only be seen at this venue, is necessary. I think the unique feature of King of Pro Wrestling Championship title is that you can propose different rules every day, and the rules are decided by voting. He also goes on to say, although it was long, I think the exodus of players will continue. In order to stop it, we need to increase our financial strength. One of the various measures is to increase the number of spectators at local. Okay, let's break all this down. Just because you want to get back the King of Pro Wrestling Championship title, which you are more than that title, Great Khan. You are more than the King of Pro Wrestling Championship title. Stop trying to make it a thing. That is not how you get it super crowded, because the Japanese fans do not care about that title. The Japanese fans care about the emotion that the wrestlers give them, the story that's being played out, and certain championship titles. And the King of Pro Wrestling title is not one of them. And to make it crowded doesn't always mean that there has to be a championship title on the line. Not every match needs a championship title. Not every story needs a championship title. Here is a perfect example. Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. As much as I would have liked Drew McIntyre to keep that World Heavyweight Championship title longer than he did and then lose it to Damian Priest, their matchup does not need the title. Their whole feud on social media and talking shit to each other and the promos, everything is so great. The crowd is getting into it. We are emotionally invested into this. And that is how you get a crowd to come in, because they need to be emotionally invested in what you're trying to sell them. You have to be the salesman. You can't just be, tell me what you want, and there's 50 options and you're not limiting those options. When you limit the options, you'll have a more super crowd. When you have too many options, then people would tend to not make a decision right away, and then you lose a customer. Sometimes less is more. And then, of course, the exodus of players will always continue. Better opportunities, better money, better life, better mental health, a lot of reasons. Another thing, again, they have to stop using the financial system as a crutch. There are other ways to get the numbers up. And then to increase the number of spectators is make them invested. Make your wrestlers also feel invested and valued in New Japan Pro Wrestling, because there is a disconnect between the Japanese culture and the American culture. And sometimes you have to adapt if you want to continue to have Americans go overseas to New Japan Pro Wrestling and also Japan. And I get it. No one anymore should try to force their ideology on you and your traditions. I totally understand that. But if you really want to grow as a business, if you really want to grow in the wrestling business, you have to adapt. You have to give and take. That's how it's going to be. But if wrestlers do not feel valued, they automatically jump. Some of them would tell you why they would jump just to give you a heads up, and they won't burn that bridge. Or they do the Aussie Open thing and jump over, and then that's it, and burn the bridge. So it's a matter of you got to value the wrestlers that you have in New Japan Pro Wrestling, the loyalty that they're giving you because they're coming to a brand new land where foreign rules and foreign culture is not really known to them. So they have to adjust. And if they're making the effort to adjust, you should also make the effort to adjust to them as well. Like I said, it's a give and take. It's not just that simple or that black and white, but foreign wrestlers want to feel valued in New Japan Pro Wrestling and not just have the Japanese wrestlers on top. And this is just me speaking in a general sense, in a general broad, because I also get upset that the Great O'Khan over here is wrestling for the King of Pro Wrestling Championship title when he should probably be going after the Global, the Never Six Men, or any other title that's not the King of Pro Wrestling. The Great O'Khan goes on to say, although he is only one wrestler and has had many wrestlers transferred from his team to AEW, he is currently doing what he can with a positive attitude. It's embarrassing to call yourself the ruler of the third largest organization in the world. Like Hiroshi Tanahashi, he will claim to be the true ruler of the future with his accomplishments in making New Japan Pro Wrestling the #1 organization in the world. For now, I'll do my best at King of Pro Wrestling on June 9th. Well, are we still talking about how Tony Khan will make New Japan Pro Wrestling better? Because he hasn't. He really hasn't. The only reason why New Japan Pro Wrestling is getting the momentum now and the exposure now is being with AEW, but they always keep losing on the show. And then ideas are probably not really talked about. It's a free-for-all. It's to do whatever you want. But the AEW fans, have they bought a subscription to New Japan World to help them out in that financial sense? Because they do need money to upkeep the website. They do need money to upkeep certain things. I appreciate the Great O'Khan's big heart. I really, really do. But his comments are misplaced. And I know he wants to help New Japan Pro Wrestling and wants to help the fans understand this partnership with AEW, because there's myself and others who are pushing back against the idea that everything is positive when, again, we're seeing everything in real time about this, about the partnership with AEW, and that it is one-sided, and that Tony Khan wants to have the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion as a prop until a couple of days before he has to fly out to Japan and fight Evil on June 9th for that championship title. There's just a lot of things that happen where it's questionable. And that's all I'm doing is asking questions, giving facts, giving opinions and perspectives on this partnership between New Japan Pro Wrestling and AEW. You guys noticed that TNA cut that partnership off quickly when nothing good came about it. And then the partnership between TNA and NXT had the highest rated segment for the women. There is a huge difference in what a partnership looks like. Right now, WWE is giving us what a healthy partnership looks like with TNA. AEW, not so much with New Japan Pro Wrestling. But let me wrap it up here. That's what I wanted to talk about, the Great O'Khan tweets. Again, the Japanese tweets, along with the English translation, even though it may not be as good as having a native Japanese speaker translate for you, will be up on the newsletter, marieshadows.substack.com. That is where you will see everything. Everything will be posted. Another message will also be posted on that newsletter. So sign up at marieshadows.substack.com to see everything and listen to the podcast episode and all of that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Square Circle Podcast. And if you did, make sure to share it out with your friends. Sharing is caring. The more listeners, the better. You can find me on social media at Maria_Shadows on Twitter. You could also email me, squarecirclepodcast@outlook.com. And you could also, again, sign up to the newsletter, marieshadows.substack.com. Make sure to hit that follow button right here on youtube.com/Squared Circle Podcast. And also follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/Marie_Shadows. And that's about it. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for caring. Thank you for commenting. I appreciate you guys. And I'll see you guys on the next one.